Hey guys, this is Dave with AudioWin, and I have another IM that falls within that very competitive $200 to $300 price range. This is the Pula ANVIL, and I've only owned one other Pula IM, and that's this here, the PA02, which was quite competitive for its price. And I know they also have the PA01, but I haven't heard that one. In any case, I am really glad I was able to get my hands on this review unit because, again, this $200 to $300 price range, it's very competitive, and I love that because that means great sound is becoming more and more affordable and more accessible to a broader consumer base, and that benefits the whole community. So as usual, we'll go over what's included in the box, we'll talk about the specifications and design, and then we'll get into the sound. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. So as you can see, this is very nicely accessorized. It comes with a very nice, very large case. Kind of reminds me of the case that came with the Fu Cantor. It also comes with a great selection of ear tips, and since the cable is modular, they've also included all three termination options, a 3.5 single-ended, and then both a 4.4 and 2.5 balanced option. It's priced at $199, and it has a tribrid driver setup consisting of one dynamic driver for balanced armature drivers and then one bone conduction driver. The housings are made out of resin, but the face plates are actually made using stabilized wood, which looks really great, especially with the purple, blue, and orange color combination. But what's really cool is that because they're using stabilized wood, the grain and the texture is going to vary or be a little bit different from unit to unit. So each faceplate is going to be unique. And this set is absolutely gorgeous. Now, one thing to be aware of is that the shells are a little on the larger side. That said, I seem to have pretty good luck with the fit, and I didn't really experience any discomfort at all, but just be aware that the shells are, again, they're a little on the larger side. And as far as the included cable, I think it's very good for this price point. It is a 2-pin cable, and again, it is modular, which is great. It's also pretty soft and manageable, and of course, since the case is larger, everything fits perfectly, even with a little room to spare. Regardless, the cable, again, it's manageable, it's easy to roll up. So all in all, considering this price point, this is a very, very solid package. The shell is well constructed and thoughtfully designed. The cable is also well built, very manageable, it's modular. The case is excellent, and you also get a really nice assortment of ear tips. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the sound. Okay, so as far as its signature or its presentation. This is what I would consider to be balanced overall, but it is a little more on the dynamic side as far as its presentation. And while I wouldn't necessarily consider it to be overly dynamic or aggressive, it does still have some of those livelier characteristics that keep the listener engaged and fairly immersed in the music. And I guess if I had to use one word to describe this set, that's probably the word I would use, immersive. And this is one of those rare cases where I do feel like the bone conduction driver is actually impacting my listening experience, at least a little, which was kind of surprising. So that is really cool. But to break things down just a little more, starting with the bass. So because of the way they approached the tuning curve, the bass presentation is a little more mid-bass focused. So the emphasis is going to be on the instruments that land within those frequencies, like kick drums, more specifically like the kick impact and the punch, or maybe even some of the lower resonant frequencies in floor toms, but also in some of the lower stringed instruments like basses or cellos. Now, that's not to say the sub bass sounds rolled off at all. There is still a decent amount of sub bass extension, but that's not where my focus is. And I think that mid bass focus is also partly what is responsible for its more dynamic presentation. Now, one thing that really impressed me about this set is its low, mid, and mid bass texture, especially considering the amount of lower mid energy, because many times that extra energy can result in bass bleed. And while I wouldn't say this is the cleanest bass I've heard at this price point, I would say it's among the cleanest for sure. So you're kind of going to get the best of both worlds. You get a little bit of warmth and richness and that note weight with vocals and even some instruments, but it does not come at the expense of its mid-bass texture and detail. So you get that physicality, but you also get the clarity and texture as well. Then as we move into the mid-range, while the upper mid could be considered maybe a little assertive and can push vocals and some instruments a little more forward, I wouldn't necessarily call it aggressive, and it doesn't cross over into that shouty territory either, in my opinion. And I think that extra energy contributes to vocal clarity as well. And I think because of the way they approached the ear gain tuning, it makes it a little easier to delineate vocals and instruments. And that's great, especially if you are going for more of an engaging kind of presentation. That said, I do wish they would have made that rise or transition into the upper mids a little less steep, because I think a little more presence maybe in the 1 to 3K region may have helped present instruments a little more naturally. Not that I would consider its upper mid range to sound totally unnatural necessarily, but when I was comparing this with the Butterfly 61T or even the PA02, for some reason their mid-range presentation just sounded a little more natural to me. Now, as you move into the treble, there is definitely some extra energy, and that energy could be considered maybe a little aggressive by some, because it does have a little bit of a bite and an edge to it. And that's probably due to some of that extra energy around 8K. So depending on how smooth you prefer your treble presentation to be, again, some may find this area of the tuning to be a little bit aggressive. That said, when I look at the rest of the tuning, it makes sense to me, especially if you're trying to achieve a more engaging type of presentation, which this absolutely does that. And that added treble energy also brings even a greater sense of clarity and detail to hi-hats or cymbals. Now, as far as the treble extension or upper treble, you do have a pretty fair amount of energy there as well, at least enough to help give the treble presentation a little bit of air and just a little bit of shimmer. Not a ton, but some. Now, the technical performance was a little bit of a mixed bag for me, because on one hand, it does give you lots of detail and even a pretty wide soundstage, at least what I would consider to be wide for an IEM. However, its imaging isn't quite as good as the 5+2. Again, it's still decent, but I feel like the 5+2 and even the Butterfly 61T are just a little more focused with the instruments and vocals, and they have a little more density and I guess realism to them. As far as comparisons, the 5+2 and the 61T are my top IEMs right now. And then there's the Chopin and Performer 5, they kind of land right below those. Now, as far as how I would rank the Anvil based on my personal tuning preference, I think I would still prefer the Chopin and Performer 5 over the Anvil because those just come across as a little more natural sounding to my ears. Although I would say I think the Anvil has a little more detail. Now, if you're looking for a more engaging and dynamic presentation, then I would give it to the Anvil, but I'm still a little more likely to reach for the Performer 5 or the Chopin. That said, it's very close. And again, I do think this is a very solid IEM. I absolutely love the dynamics in the bass presentation, and it also has very good vocal clarity with lots of detail. And then when you factor in that wider soundstage, all of that does really work together and make for a pretty immersive listening experience. And then when you add that bone conduction driver in there, I think that's the quality that stands out to me the most, or at least the two qualities. It's engaging and it's immersive. And don't forget, it's also very well accessorized as well. So you get a great cable, great case, and lots of ear tips. So it doesn't fall into my top 5, but again, I do think this is a really solid entry into this $200 to $300 price point. So well done, Pula. So that concludes my review of the Pula Anvil. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please comment on this video, please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.